The Roman Empire. At its peak in 117 AD under Emperor Trajan, Rome controlled 5 million square kilometers, from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Mesopotamia. Over 50 million people, roughly 20% of the world's population, lived under Roman rule. Rome built 250,000 miles of roads, created a legal system still used today, and maintained peace across the Mediterranean for 200 years. The Pax Romana made Rome the longest-lasting superpower in Western history. But Rome's size became its weakness. By the 3rd century, the empire was too large to govern effectively. The crisis of the 3rd century saw 26 emperors in 50 years, most assassinated. Inflation destroyed the currency. Silver content in coins dropped from 90% to 5%. Germanic tribes raided the borders. In 285 AD, Emperor Diocletian split the empire into eastern and western halves to make it manageable. Constantine moved the capital to Constantinople in 330 AD, shifting power east. The Western Empire weakened while defending a 4,000-mile frontier with a shrinking army. By 400 AD, Germanic tribes weren't just raiding. They were settling inside the empire. Visigoths sacked Rome in 410 AD for the first time in 800 years. Vandals sacked it again in 455 AD. Roman emperors became puppets of Germanic generals. On September 4th, 476 AD, Germanic chieftain Odoacer deposed 16-year-old Emperor Romulus Augustulus. Instead of proclaiming himself emperor, Odoacer simply sent the imperial regalia to Constantinople. There was no final battle, no dramatic siege. The Western Roman Empire simply ceased to exist. Odoacer declared himself king of Italy. Germanic kingdoms replaced Roman provinces across the West. Europe entered the Dark Ages. An empire that ruled for 500 years ended not with a bang, but with administrative dissolution, the Mongol Empire. In 1206, Genghis Khan united nomadic tribes and built the largest contiguous land empire in history, 12 million square miles stretching from Korea to Hungary. At its peak under his grandson Kublai Khan, the Mongols controlled 110 million people, roughly 25% of the world's population. They created a postal system spanning continents, secured the Silk Road, and killed an estimated 40 million people in conquests, 10% of the global population. The Mongols succeeded through superior tactics, logistics, and brutality. They could cover 60 miles per day on horseback, 3 times faster than contemporary armies. Psychological warfare was policy: surrender immediately or face total annihilation. By 1241, they had conquered China, Central Asia, Persia, and Russia, and raided into Poland and Hungary. But when Genghis Khan died in 1227, succession disputes began. The empire was divided among his sons into 4 khanates: the Golden Horde in Russia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Yuan dynasty in China. By 1260, the khanates were effectively independent, united only in name. Kublai Khan proclaimed himself Great Khan, but couldn't enforce authority over his cousins. The Ilkhanate in Persia converted to Islam and became culturally Persian. The Golden Horde fought the Ilkhanate in the 1260s. In China, Kublai completed the conquest, but faced constant rebellion from the Han Chinese majority. The Black Death, which the Mongols may have spread through trade routes, killed millions and destabilized the empire in the 1340-50s. In 1368, Chinese rebel leader Zhu Yuanzhang captured Beijing and drove the Mongols back to the steppes. The Yuan dynasty fell. The Ming dynasty rose. By 1400, the Mongol Empire had splintered into minor steppe kingdoms. The largest land empire in history disintegrated in less than 150 years. The Ottoman Empire. For over 600 years, the Ottomans controlled 3 continents, ruling from Budapest to Baghdad, from Algiers to the Persian Gulf. At its peak in 1683, the empire spanned 5.2 million square kilometers, with 30 million people. The Ottomans conquered Constantinople in 1453, ending the Byzantine Empire. They controlled Mediterranean trade, threatened Vienna twice, and created a multi-ethnic, multi-religious state that lasted longer than any empire since Rome. The empire peaked under Suleiman the Magnificent in the 1500s, but by 1700, military stagnation set in. Janissaries, once elite slave soldiers, became a conservative political force resisting modernization. The empire lost territory in every war. Hungary to Austria in 1699, Crimea to Russia in 1774, and Egypt effectively became independent by 1805. By 1800, the Ottomans were called the sick man of Europe. Nationalist movements erupted. Greece gained independence in 1832, Serbia in 1878. The empire tried reform, the Tanzimat modernization in the 1800s, constitutional monarchy in 1876, but it was too late and too limited. In 1914, the Ottomans made a fatal decision to ally with Germany in World War I. British and Arab forces captured Jerusalem in 1917, Damascus in 1918. The empire lost 3 million people. On November 1st, 1922, the Turkish Grand National Assembly voted to abolish the Sultanate. The Ottoman Empire, which had existed for 624 years, was formally dissolved. The Spanish Empire. After Columbus reached the Americas in 1492, Spain built the first global empire where the sun never set. By 1600, Spain controlled most of South and Central America, the Philippines, parts of Italy, the Netherlands, and Portugal. Silver from Potosi and Bolivia made Spain the wealthiest nation in Europe. At its peak, the empire covered 13.7 million square kilometers. Spanish galleons connected 4 continents in the first truly global trade network. But Spanish power rested on American silver, and that created fatal weaknesses. Massive inflation destroyed the Spanish economy. Prices increased 400% in the 1500s. Spain fought constant wars against Protestant Dutch rebels for 80 years, against England, culminating in the Spanish Armada's defeat in 1588, and against France repeatedly. The empire was bleeding money faster than silver could replace it. Spain declared bankruptcy 7 times between 1557 and 1696. On December 10, 1898, Spain signed the Treaty of Paris, ceding the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico to the United States. Cuba became nominally independent, but under U.S. control. Spain's last significant overseas possessions were gone. An empire that once spanned the globe was reduced to its European homeland, the British Empire. At its peak in 1920, Britain controlled 35.5 million square kilometers, nearly a quarter of Earth's land surface, ruling 412 million people, 20% of the world's population. The empire spanned every continent: Canada, Australia, India, large parts of Africa, and strategic bases worldwide, including Gibraltar, Singapore, and Hong Kong. The Royal Navy dominated the seas with 1,400 warships. Britain truly was the empire where the sun never set. World War I weakened Britain catastrophically. 900,000 British soldiers died, and the debt skyrocketed. Independence movements gained momentum, most notably in Ireland in 1922 and Egypt in 1922. World War II delivered the killing blow. Britain spent 25% of its national wealth fighting Germany. By 1945, Britain was bankrupt, dependent on American loans. The empire became impossible to maintain. India, the jewel in the crown, demanded independence. Britain no longer had the money or military to hold it. On August 15, 1947, India and Pakistan gained independence, taking 380 million people out of the empire overnight. Decolonization accelerated in the 1950s and 60s. Ghana in 1957, Nigeria in 1960, Kenya in 1963. The Commonwealth replaced the empire, a voluntary association with symbolic ties to the British Crown. On June 30, 1997, at midnight, Britain's last major colony ended. Hong Kong, leased from China in 1898 for 99 years, was returned. The British Empire was over. The French colonial empire. At its height in the 1920s, France controlled 13.5 million square kilometers, the second largest empire after Britain, with 150 million people. France dominated West and Central Africa, Indochina, the Pacific Islands, and the Caribbean. Unlike Britain's commercial empire, France pursued assimilation, trying to make colonies culturally French. French was the language of African education. Paris was considered the mother country, even by colonized peoples. World War II shattered French imperial prestige. France fell to Germany in 6 weeks in 1940. Colonies like Vietnam and Algeria saw French weakness firsthand. After liberation in 1945, France tried to reassert control, but France refused to let go of Algeria, home to 1 million European settlers. The Algerian War began in 1954 with the FLN demanding independence. France sent 400,000 troops. The war became brutal. Torture, massacres, terrorism on both sides. By 1962, 300,000 Algerians and 30,000 French were dead. The Algerian War nearly caused civil war in France. Army generals attempted a coup in 1961 to keep Algeria French. President Charles de Gaulle, who initially supported keeping Algeria, realized the war was unwinnable. On March 18, 1962, he signed the Avian Accords, granting Algeria independence. France granted independence to most of its sub-Saharan African colonies in 1960, 14 countries in a single year. The second largest empire dissolved in 2 decades, the Japanese Empire. In just 77 years, Japan transformed from an isolated feudal society into a major imperial power. After the Meiji Restoration in 1868, Japan industrialized at breakneck speed. By 1942, Japan controlled 7.4 million square kilometers. Korea, Taiwan, Manchuria, much of China's coast, Indochina, the Philippines, Indonesia, and Pacific Islands reaching almost to Australia. Over 500 million people lived under Japanese occupation. It was the fastest imperial rise in modern history. Japan's expansion was driven by resource scarcity and military ambition. Victory over Russia in 1905 shocked the world, the first time an Asian power defeated a European one in modern warfare. Japan annexed Korea in 1910, seized German Pacific Islands in World War I, and invaded Manchuria in 1931. But the real expansion came after 1937. The invasion of China killed millions but bogged Japan down. Seeking oil and rubber, Japan invaded Southeast Asia in 1941–42, simultaneously attacking Pearl Harbor. By mid-1942, Japan controlled a vast empire, but it was overstretched, brutal, and ultimately unsustainable. American island-hopping campaigns recaptured territory piece by piece: Guadalcanal, Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. By 1945, American B-29 bombers were firebombing Japanese cities. Tokyo, Osaka, and 60 other cities burned. On August 6, 1945, the atomic bomb destroyed Hiroshima, killing 80,000 instantly. On August 9, Nagasaki. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito addressed the nation by radio for the first time in history. He announced Japan's surrender, calling the war situation not necessarily to Japan's advantage. Japan, which had never been conquered, was defeated. The empire was over. Nazi Germany. In just 12 years, Nazi Germany conquered most of Europe and committed the worst genocide in history. Adolf Hitler became chancellor in 1933 and immediately began rearmament, violating the Treaty of Versailles. The Third Reich, Hitler proclaimed, would last 1,000 years. It lasted 12. Hitler's blitzkrieg strategy stunned Europe. Poland fell in 35 days in 1939, Denmark in 6 hours, Norway in 2 months, and France in 6 weeks in 1940. By 1941, only Britain remained unconquered in Western Europe. Hitler's fatal mistake came on June 22, 1941. Operation Barbarossa, invading the Soviet Union with 3.8 million troops. By December, Germany was bogged down outside Moscow in sub-zero temperatures. On December 11th, Hitler declared war on the United States after Pearl Harbor, adding another enemy. Meanwhile, the Holocaust accelerated, and 6 million Jews were systematically murdered. After Stalingrad in 1943 and D-Day in 1944, the Allies closed in from east and west. Soviet forces captured Warsaw, Budapest, and Vienna. By April 1945, Soviet artillery was hitting Berlin. Hitler retreated to his bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery as the city burned above. On April 30th, with Soviet forces 300 meters away, Hitler shot himself. His body was burned in the Chancellery Garden. On May 7, 1945, at 2:41 a.m., German General Alfred Jodl signed the unconditional surrender in Reims. The Nazi state ceased to exist. The Thousand-Year Reich had lasted exactly 12 years and 3 months. The Soviet Union. For 69 years, the USSR stood as the world's first communist superpower, spanning 11 time zones and 22.4 million square kilometers, the largest country ever to exist. At its peak in the 1970s, the Soviet Union had 290 million people, the world's second-largest economy, 40,000 nuclear weapons, and influenced a third of humanity through communist parties worldwide. The Soviet system achieved rapid industrialization and won World War II at enormous cost, 27 million dead. But by the 1970s, cracks appeared. The centrally planned economy stagnated. Consumer goods were scarce. Technology lagged behind the West. The war in Afghanistan from 1979 to 1989 cost 15,000 Soviet lives and demoralized the military. When Mikhail Gorbachev became leader in 1985, he introduced reforms, glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring. He wanted to save communism. Instead, he unleashed forces that destroyed it. Once people could speak freely, they demanded change. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. Soviet satellite states in Eastern Europe abandoned communism one by one. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, East Germany, all in a single year. In August 1991, hardline communists attempted a coup to stop reforms. Boris Yeltsin, president of the Russian Republic, stood on a tank outside the parliament and rallied resistance. The coup collapsed in 3 days, but the Soviet Union was finished. On December 25, 1991, at 7:35 p.m. Moscow time, Mikhail Gorbachev appeared on television and resigned as president of the Soviet Union. He signed a decree transferring control of Soviet nuclear weapons to Boris Yeltsin. At midnight, the Soviet flag was lowered from the Kremlin for the last time. The Russian flag rose. The Soviet Union ceased to exist. The American Empire. After World War II, the United States emerged as the world's dominant superpower, the first truly global hegemon. America had 50% of the world's GDP in 1945, the only nuclear weapons until 1949, and military bases on 6 continents. The dollar became the global reserve currency. American culture, movies, music, fast food spread worldwide. By 1991, after the Soviet collapse, the U.S. had no rivals. This was the unipolar moment, one superpower, unmatched in history. American dominance rested on military might, economic power, and alliances. NATO protected Europe. Bases in Japan, South Korea, and Germany project power globally. The U.S. won the Cold War without fighting the Soviet Union directly. The Gulf War in 1991 demonstrated overwhelming military superiority. By 2000, America seemed invincible. Then came September 11, 2001.
Oh my God, there it goes!
The U.S. invaded Afghanistan and Iraq, beginning 2 decades of war. The 2008 financial crisis originated in America, damaging global confidence. China's economy grew exponentially, reaching 70% of U.S. GDP by 2020. American political dysfunction increased. Polarization, government shutdowns, contested elections. By 2020, clear signs of decline appeared. The chaotic Afghanistan withdrawal in 2021 echoed Vietnam. China challenges American supremacy economically and militarily, building a navy to rival the U.S., investing trillions in Belt and Road infrastructure across Asia and Africa. Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, testing Western unity. Allies question U.S. reliability. Domestically, inequality rises, infrastructure crumbles, and political violence returns. The unipolar moment is over. The question isn't whether America remains powerful, it's whether it remains the superpower. That answer isn't yet clear. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See what's next. The Russian army. The army that was supposed to take Kiev in 3 days. The Russian army entered the 20th century with a massive reputation.